Now, Ryan, we've read that this isn't an isolated incident. Do you want to bring us up to speed about what's going on with Western ranchers today?
Well, sure. There's, let me talk about the past. Like I said, this is not an isolated incident. They have run ranchers off the land all across the country and demonized them and destroyed their livelihood, destroyed their lives, and taken their property and just ruined them. And that has not stopped. They're continually doing that. I have a list of a handful or names of ranchers right now that the same thing is happening to them. The Bureau of Land Management is trying to rid them off the range and trying to eliminate their rights and run them off the ranch. Now, there's been some ranchers that have fought back, but none who has made the same stand that we have. And some people have asked, why haven't other ranchers done the same thing that you have? Well, again, I think because of the ignorance. They don't have the education that they need to know. And we've been trying to share that with them and trying to share the knowledge that we have gained so that they can do the same thing. But also, it's a courage issue. They need to have the faith and not the fear. And with knowledge comes faith, because now they can act upon knowledge rather than upon fear, rather than upon myth. And a lot of the ranchers just haven't had that. The other thing is that some ranchers have participated in farm subsidies, government handouts. And you can't hold back with one hand if you're taking dole on the other hand. If you're going to stand on true principle, then you need to stand on true principle. And many of the ranchers haven't been doing that, and so they're in a position that their integrity is compromised because they've been on the dole.
So before this started, your dad was really at wit's end about how to handle this. And didn't you mention to me the other day that it had affected his health?
Sure, that was clear back in the early 90s, however. But he did come to an understanding, and with that understanding came great strength. And he has been healthier this last 20 years than he had been most of his life prior to that. It's quite interesting, actually. You should get, less healthy as you get older, and he has become more healthy.
Hey Ryan, what would you say if somebody came up to you and said that you owe the grazing fees, you should pay the grazing fees?
Well, I would say to them, what are grazing fees? First of all, most people don't even understand what the grazing fees are or what they were, and where they're applied and who gets that money. They're certainly not taxes. They don't go to the general public. So the grazing rights belong to the ranchers. It's not paying for the grazing, the right to graze. It's a management fee. Now, a rancher can only pay a grazing fee if he signs a contract with the Bureau of Land Management. Now, the Bureau of Land Management is exactly that. It's a management group, and they want to manage the land, and those who contract with them pay the grazing fees. We had no contract with them. Because we had no contract with them, they had no right to charge us for management fees. Now, had we signed their contract so that we could pay the fees, this is what would have happened. Number one, the contract is where they get their authority. They have no authority otherwise. And by signing the contract, and in the contract, it authorizes them to make management decisions for our ranch. Now, the management decisions that they were making was purposely to run us out of business. And had we signed the contract and had we paid the fees, we would have been run out of business 20 years ago. They did not want our grazing fees. They did not want our money. They didn't want our money because they wanted us out of business. Now, this is evident, again, because they run the other 52 ranchers out of business in Clark County. They've run hundreds others out of business all across the country. Um, and so, had we signed their contracts and had we tried to pay the grazing fee, we would have been out of business 20 years ago.
Confusion on who actually owns the land. I mean, it's public land, the government owns it, the BLM owns it. Explain this for us. It's confusing to people that don't live out west.
All right. Well, the easiest way to go about that is, again, to turn to the Constitution of the United States. In the Constitution of the United States, we, the people, give the federal government their authority. We give them specific duties and responsibilities to do. Under Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17 is the place where we tell the federal government what land they can own. In that, we've told them that they can have the 10-mile square, which is Washington, D.C., and we give that to them completely. Washington, D.C. does not belong to any state. It is the federal government's land, irrevocably, undisputably, it is theirs. They have unlimited and plenary control over it to make all needful rules and regulations. Now, it says that they can have like authority over such districts that the state legislatures, by the consent of the state legislatures in the respective state, will sell to them. So in other words, the federal government has to make a purchase. They have to get the state legislature's consent, and then that land can only be used for military bases, arsenals, dockyards, and other needful buildings. So within an admitted state of the Union, the federal government can only own land that is for military bases, arsenals, dockyards, and other needful buildings. So, land that is claimed ownership by the Bureau of Land Management, Forest Service, National Recreation Areas, monuments, etc., none of that is covered under the Constitution of the United States. So the question is does a person living in the eastern states have rights to the so-called public lands within the western states? The answer to that is no. This land in each state belongs to the state and her people, and is to be controlled by the government closest to the people, which is the county government. So in essence, this land within Clark County belongs to the people of Clark County. Now, other people can come here and visit and camp and hike and fish, and they can enjoy this land as visitors, and we welcome them. If you want to come here from New York or from any other state in the Union, then come. You're welcome here. But this land doesn't belong to America as a whole. This land belongs to the people of Clark County, and particularly to the people of the state of Nevada.
Okay, how do you, when people say you're using federal land, or they say land that they pay for with their taxpayer money, and you're using it for free and you're freeloading, what do you say about that?
That they're misunderstanding, and that that's not truly the case, because we're not freeloading off the public trough. That again, this land belongs to the state of Nevada and her people, and these rights that have been established are long and they're old, and we are more than willing to share our production with the proper form of government. We're willing to share that with the county, but we're not freeloading from the people of America. It's not the case.
So when you have a different type of right, your grazing rights and water rights give you a different right on the land. Like if I want to come up from Las Vegas and go camping or ATVing here sometime, I can do that because this is public lands.
Sure. The people have the right to come here. They have the right to access the land. They have the right to camp on it. They have the right to hunt, to fish, to recreate. And these are rights that all the public have. A rancher does have additional rights that the general public does not have. We have the right to build infrastructure for our cattle, corrals, water troughs, fence lines, etc. We have the right to have the cattle on there to graze it. We own the water rights on the land. And so these are rights that we have that other people don't have. Now we also have the same rights that other people have. We can go camping, etc., all those things. Now our grazing right is much like a right of way that, say, like a power company or a utility company would have across the land. Okay, they don't necessarily own the land, but they have a right to place their utility across that land. And their right of way might be, you know, a narrow strip, 30 feet wide or so, to place their utility. And that right stays there for a very long time, unless they decide to remove that utility. But in our case, a grazing right, we cover a wide area of land, but it's a very similar thing.
Is that something, are there any documents that said you have that right, or is it just something that the Constitution or the state constitution says that you have?
Sure, absolutely. It is attached to the water rights, and the legal documentation as far as the state of Nevada is concerned. Those rights are attached to the water rights on the land.
And that's something that you guys have in possession. You have a document that says you've got the water rights, you have the mineral rights, and the grazing rights just come with that.
Sure, they do, as well as any historical documentation from others who have had the rights and have been passed down from generation to generation, or we have purchased.
Okay, so for someone that is saying that you're freeloading on government land, they don't understand the Constitution.
They don't understand the Constitution, first of all, because it's not government land, but then each state has its own laws concerning these rights. I know that Nevada's laws differ from that of Utah's, and they differ from that of Arizona's. I know Arizona's and Nevada's are a little closer in nature than Utah's. But yes, each state has laws that recognize those rights.